On this channel, we've delved into numerous box office failures, noting that most share common traits. Typically, these flops involve grand spectacles with costly special effects, or are set in intriguing distant worlds. They often aim to launch blockbuster franchises. Yet, the subject of today's video defies these norms. It's a relatively low-key romantic comedy, lacking extravagant visuals or franchise ambitions, but it still managed to lose over $100 million. Today, we're examining the 2010 film How Do You Know? We'll explore its production background, analyze why it flopped, and I'll share some personal perspectives on the project. How Do You Know was both written and directed by James L. Brooks, a legendary figure best known for co-creating beloved sitcoms such as The Mary Tyler Moore Show, Taxi, and The Simpsons. He also directed acclaimed films like Terms of Endearment, Broadcast News, and As Good as It Gets. Brooks conceived the idea for How Do You Know in 2005, desiring to craft a story about a young female athlete. The project eventually landed at Columbia Pictures, with casting beginning in late 2008. Reese Witherspoon was cast as the lead, Lisa, while Owen Wilson and Paul Rudd were brought on as her two love interests, Matty and George, respectively. Bill Murray was originally considered for the role of George's father, Charles, but he declined, and the part went to Jack Nicholson, who had previously worked with Brooks on As Good as It Gets. Filming commenced in June 2009 and wrapped up by November of the same year, with most scenes shot in Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. By the time production concluded, the budget had ballooned to an eye-watering $120 million. Yes, a romantic comedy with a $120 million budget, making it one of the most expensive rom-coms ever made. Yet, viewers wouldn't detect such a massive budget from watching the film, as it features no extravagant set pieces or visual spectacle. So where did all that money go? Nearly half of the budget was allocated to salaries for the cast and director. Reese Witherspoon reportedly earned $15 million, Jack Nicholson $12 million, Owen Wilson $10 million, Paul Rudd $3 million, and James L. Brooks himself $10 million. That's a staggering $50 million just for talent fees. To put that in perspective, those salaries alone could have funded 5 films like Lady Bird, 11 Get Outs, or 125 Napoleon Dynamites. Additionally, the filmmakers decided to reshoot both the beginning and ending of the movie, further driving up costs. Many have also pointed fingers at Brooks's slow, meticulous shooting approach and post-production process. Despite these issues, Columbia Pictures must have been confident these big names would draw audiences. How Do You Know premiered in theaters on December 17, 2010, opening to a modest $7 million weekend. It ranked 8th at the box office, trailing behind films like Tron Legacy, Yogi Bear, The Chronicles of Narnia, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Fighter, Tangled, The Tourist, and Black Swan. Domestically, it grossed $30 million, with an additional $18 million internationally, totaling $48 million worldwide. Against its colossal $120 million budget, not even factoring in marketing and distribution, it was a catastrophic financial failure. In fact, it resides among the top 25 biggest box office bombs ever, with estimated losses ranging from $100 million to $140 million. This raises the inevitable question: how did this film crash so spectacularly? The answer to why this movie flopped is quite apparent. The $120 million budget was simply absurd. For comparison, 3 other romantic comedies released in 2010 or 2011 performed much better on far smaller budgets. Life as We Know It earned over $100 million on a $38 million budget. Friends with Benefits made $150 million on $35 million. And Crazy Stupid Love grossed $145 million on $50 million. The last two also featured big-name stars, just like How Do You Know? I also blame the film's title and marketing approach. The title is dreadful, unmemorable, not clearly a rom-com, and oddly phrased as a question that lacks a question mark. It's baffling. The posters seem to rely solely on the star power to attract viewers, which didn't work. The trailers failed to clearly communicate the plot, becoming muddled in multiple subplots, making the film look painfully average. The trailer's music even sounded like cheap royalty-free stock music, which is especially ironic given the film's enormous budget. Even though I use royalty-free music in my own videos, mine don't cost $120 million, only around $90 million. Check out the trailer. It comes off as cheesy and almost like a fake Saturday Night Live skit. Another factor was James L. Brooks's diminished box office appeal by 2010. Though he had an Oscar-winning hit with As Good As It Gets in 1997, much of that goodwill had faded. The only film he made between then and How Do You Know was Spanglish in 2004, which also bombed and received mixed reviews. As mentioned earlier, How Do You Know was buried at the box office, debuting 8th in its opening weekend. Although the target audiences of competing films like Tron Legacy and Yogi Bear likely didn't overlap much with this film's demographic, it's worth noting that releasing on the same day as those titles, along with Narnia and Tangled, certainly didn't help its chances. The final blow to How Do You Know was the terrible reviews and lack of positive word of mouth. It currently holds a 31% critic score and a 25% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, alongside a 5.4 out of 10 on IMDb, and a 2.3 out of 5 on Letterboxd. This failure landed James L. Brooks in what some call director's jail, as he didn't direct another film until 2025's Ella McKay. However, the main cast members largely emerged unscathed, continuing with successful careers. Unfortunately, this film marked Jack Nicholson's final acting role before retirement, which is a sad way for such an iconic actor to bow out. Now that we've discussed the commercial failure, let's explore why it also fails as a movie. Before diving into the critique, here's a quick plot summary. Spoilers ahead. The film centers on Lisa, a professional softball player who has recently been cut from her team for being too old. She's intermittently dating Matty, a famous pro baseball player who's a bit of a buffoon and not a reliable boyfriend. Meanwhile, we meet George, who is under federal investigation for corporate wrongdoing at his father's company. After losing his job and girlfriend, George impulsively asks Lisa out, and she agrees. Since Lisa is still seeing Matty, she declines to commit romantically to George, and they remain friends. Over the course of the movie, Lisa breaks up with Matty due to his awful behavior and spends more time with George, though she never initiates romance. This repetitive cycle drags on until Lisa finally realizes George is the right partner, and they end up together. Meanwhile, George's father is revealed as the culprit behind the corporate malfeasance and is sentenced to jail. If the producers had taken the $120 million spent on making this film, piled it up, and set it on fire, the spectacle would have been far more entertaining than the movie itself. I'm not a huge fan of romantic comedies to begin with, so this film started at a disadvantage with me. But when I watch a rom-com, I expect at least two core things. It should be romantic and comedic. How Do You Know is neither. Let's start with the romance. The film relies on a tired trope. The female lead starts with a rich, famous, but terrible boyfriend, and continually pushes away the nice guy who truly understands her. The problem is that Reese Witherspoon and Paul Rudd have almost no romantic chemistry. This lack is exacerbated by a terrible script that puts them in the most bland and awkward situations imaginable. For example, their first date consists of yelling at each other, followed by a long, silent dinner. This is supposed to be some kind of epiphany for George, as if Lisa telling him not to talk is a profound moment. The dialogue James L. Brooks wrote for these characters is strange and awkward. It lacks rhythm, filled with awkward pauses that seem intended for comedic effect, but often miss the mark. Even emotional moments feel flat. George frequently cracks jokes or tries to connect with Lisa, only to be met with blank stares, as if he's a complete weirdo. The only genuinely funny moments came from Owen Wilson's character, who plays the lovable idiot archetype exceptionally well. His scenes were the only real highlight. As for the other performances, I was indifferent. I didn't enjoy Paul Rudd's performance, which is disappointing since I'm usually a fan. Reese Witherspoon's character was unappealing, largely due to the weak writing. Jack Nicholson delivered a decent performance in his limited scenes, but his subplot felt entirely disconnected, as if it belonged to a different film. Speaking of that subplot, the corporate malfeasance angle is an odd inclusion for a romantic comedy. It's dull and feels out of place. The story attempts to make it a dramatic centerpiece by having the father responsible for the fraud, trying to pin it on his son. George faces a choice: take the blame and serve 3 years in prison, or let his father go to jail for 25 years. And oddly, this life-altering decision hinges on whether Lisa will be with George or not. The entire setup is strange and failed to resonate with me, as I simply didn't care about the subplot. The only truly memorable fact about this film is its astonishing budget, which exceeded that of any Lord of the Rings movie or Star Wars prequel. That's right, most Lord of the Rings films cost about $95 million, and Star Wars prequels hovered around $115 million. It's shocking that a modest romantic comedy had a larger budget than these epic franchises. I realize I've repeated this point multiple times, but it's just so bizarre. In conclusion, How Do You Know is an oddity among box office bombs. It has an inexplicably high budget and failed to attract audiences despite its star power. It's no surprise it's been largely forgotten, never even gaining the infamy of other flops. But what do you think of the film? Have you seen it or even heard of it? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.